to this leadership studio in which we are inviting Indian and global industry and thought leaders to address the challenging facing the industry today. Today we have invited Mr. Chandrajit Banerjee, Director General CII of the Confederation of Indian Industry, to the studio to talk to us on the topic recovering from disruption, dealing with uncertainty. Ladies and gentlemen, with more than 58 lakh cases and 3.57 lakh deaths, the COVID-19 pandemic shows no signs of abating. As vaccine is yet to be found, lockdown remains the only way to slow down the spread. However, lockdowns are also pushing major economies to the brink. The IMF has revised its global GDP growth estimate from 3.3% just a few months ago to a contraction of 3%, something not seen since the Great Depression of the 1930s. IMF also says that India will remain the fastest growing major economy in 2020. But one must remember that COVID onslaught is only at an early stage in India. So where are we headed? Can India recover from this disruption? How long will the impact of this disruption last? What happens if the pandemic persists and grows? Ladies and gentlemen, to get answers to these uncertainties and to these questions, we will now soon be turning to Mr. Chandrajit Banerjee, DG CII. CII, as we all know, is India's apex industry organization with more than 9,000 direct and 3 lakh indirect members. It is proactively enhancing the competitiveness of Indian industry. CII also serves as a reference point for Indian industry and the international business community. Mr. Banerjee has been with CII for 32 years now, and he has served as its Director General since 2008. In this post, he is responsible for the overall operations of CII. He holds and has also held trusteeship and board member positions in many institutions, including the CII Foundation, Indian Institutes of Management, World Economic Forum, Global Agenda Council of India, and many, many more. Ladies and gentlemen, I will now hand you over to Mr. Banerjee to commence his talk. Should you have any questions during the talk, please post them on the Q&A on the bottom right of your screen, and we will request Mr. Banerjee to take them on after his talk. Over to you, sir, Mr. Banerjee.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Am I audible?
Yes, sir, you are audible.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Brigadier Sharma, and for that introduction. Really appreciate that. And thank you very much for inviting me to this interaction here today. It's a pleasure indeed to always be with the Amity. And it is a measure of the uncertain time that we find ourselves in that this is taking place on a virtual platform. And it's always good to speak at this platform of Amity once again, and this time on uncertainty and how can we lead during uncertainty. In the last few weeks, if one sees the clouds of COVID have been gathering all over the world, we have seen a massive rise in uncertainty. Just about 5 months ago, no one could have predicted such a complete disruption in all our lives as it is today. And even now, how can we say as to what's going to happen in another few months' time? Nobody is really certain as to how things are going to move from here on. We have seen many such events causing an increase in the uncertainty index in the world. For example, the oil shock in the 1970s, if I can go back to, rattled the global economy quite a bit. More recently, the global financial crisis caused a worldwide recession that took years to return to stability, with with a jury really being out on whether we got out of the crisis completely before the COVID 2019 struck us. Terror attacks and large wars have also raised uncertainty for businesses on many occasions before this. Unlike most black swan events that I referred to that we have seen in the last century or so, this one has the implications for lives everywhere, be it in any income class, any geography, or any society. And in the current situation, there are many questions that really come to our mind, such as are such uncertainties really going to be a part of the next normal? Will we see more such black swan events taking place? How is the present COVID pandemic going to change the world? What should we do to manage the situation, and even explore how we could find opportunities in today's crisis? Recently I was referring to this paper, the RBI paper, which evolved a very different criteria for measuring uncertainty in India. And it has used big data to examine newspaper articles, internet searches, and sentiment analysis. It found that uncertainty is negatively linked with economic activity in India. Higher uncertainty adversely affects inflation, private investments, financial markets, and GDP. Therefore, as a nation, how we can manage uncertainty, this is a key to our growth and our developmental mission. And uncertainty is, as is often said, relates to the knowns and unknowns, the unknown knowns and the unknown unknowns. So in these changed and unprecedented circumstances, we will have to dice and slice the data points that we have at hand, use sophisticated forecasting tools, identify future scenarios, and work out probable responses to the crisis situation that will keep unfolding before us. We must look at which are the key uncertainties that will impact economic and social institutions and industry. We use these to prepare different scenarios or different possible futures, and for each of these, they work out various strategies. Once we have various strategies options before us, we can decide on how we would be doing the best in terms of the selections. For India, the present situation of course throws up many challenges in the recovery issues. The government of India's decisions to lock down was, many believe, quite timely. However, on the other hand, this has had deep ramifications on the economic activities, as many of us are seeing it today. According to a snap poll conducted by us at the CII that captures the opinion of almost 300 plus CEOs in the country, it may take more than a year for the economy to get back onto its feet once again. And additionally, it is also important for us to note that according to a large proportion of the firms that were surveyed, a recovery in domestic demand for their product or services may precede the recovery in the foreign demand for the same. As far as the Indian economy is concerned, the COVID situation has impacted the most vulnerable sections of the society: the daily wage earners, migrant workers, households at the bottom of the income pyramid, and many others. Many sectors, including the transport sector, the aviation sector, the tourism sector, the hospitality sector, construction sector, are amongst the worst that are hit today. There are a few more sectors. The MSME segment is facing the brunt of the crisis and needs revival plans and support to tide this over. At the same time, there is a silver lining, as one sees, for the country as well, and I will dwell on it in some details as we go along. After all, it was a crisis situation when India undertook the economic reforms. If we go back, for faster recovery from disruptive changes, the overall economic environment must be resilient and conducive. India has already taken several proactive steps to cement its leadership position at the global level. The Prime Minister initiated the interactions with the SAARC countries, managed to get the G20 to work on a health emergency, and brought together the BRIC countries together. Over the last few weeks, the government and the RBI introduced some new policies that add to the wave of the reforms that I just referred to. The structural reforms are in areas of, as we have seen, in agriculture, in privatization of public sector enterprises, commercialization of coal mining, reforms of the power distribution companies, and so on. We believe that these reforms will open up new avenues for growth, both in the domestic as well as in the global economy. At the global level, we see several opportunities that are emerging in front of us today. New kind of globalization may now be taking place. This would be characterized by sort of shorter supply chains, change in the just-in-time model of business, different ways of reaching the consumer, remote working, remote service provisions, and so on. One of the present trend in globalization is shifting out of China, and we have all heard quite a bit about it. That is taking place amongst the businesses around the world. There is a definite opportunity here for India to capitalize on this trend and attract FDI into key sectors of our economy. India's current presence, if you see in the global value chain, is somewhat limited. And so there is a scope for enhancing FDI for plugging into these global value chains. India offers a good opportunity in terms of competitive labor, high degree of quality attainments, significant outward orientation, and so on and so forth. With some further key reforms that we need, the country could attract significant investments from the globe. CII, for instance, has suggested land and labor reforms. We have also talked about administrative reforms and judicial reforms, which will all contribute towards investing the climate for investments. A lot of progress have actually been made on the ease of doing business front. We have heard about it in terms of our business rankings at the global level. But there is need to ensure that these percolates down to the states and the district levels of our country. The current situation has thrown up many issues at the central, state, and local government levels, which needs to be managed. There needs to be much more synergy, and an effort really is required when it comes to ease of doing business in terms of this at the state level and the district levels, and ensuring conducive investment climate at the grassroots. Many reforms are required in the financial services sector also to enable businesses to access adequate credit and to make available funds for long-term infrastructure investments. The corporate bond markets, for instance, are to be deepened and for this purpose, and banks also need to be capitalized adequately with efficiency norms. So what could be the big ideas for business in dealing with this uncertainty that we are in? Taking this to the COVID context, really, all CEOs today are in strategy mode, looking at risks, looking at opportunities, and checking out how to reshape their organizations post the COVID. The issues that are really going deep, one is going into a deep dive, so to say, include shifts in markets, change in supply chains, leveraging technology, and managing consumer expectations. And above all, figuring out how best to leverage the newly learned methods and newly learned merits from working from home, as many of us are probably still doing. This crisis has actually also taught us many things, and it has opened our eyes to the new opportunities that we all keep referring to. For example, this has highlighted the critical importance to our food and nutritional security. I see greater scope for organic foods to gain markets if we institute the best grading and certification systems and organize the right logistics networks. There is also a growing need for modernization of agriculture that will spur new demand for agri-tech, equipment, cold chain infrastructure, food retailing, and so on. And in the recent months, a large section of the society had deepened on e-commerce players and others delivering essential goods, including food items at our doorstep. And there is every reason to believe that e-commerce companies will continue to meet this market need ever after this crisis abates. The lockdown that meant really that schools, colleges, and university students have to stay put at home. But thanks to the online services, it is possible for classes to be conducted in virtual space. It has been done, and we look forward much more of that happening. And looking ahead, e-learning will see a steep increase in demand, and a huge lot of innovations are expected also in this particular space. Pharmaceuticals and healthcare services, and I must speak about that, and that will continue to see a rising demand. We are the largest provider from India, as all of us know, on generic drugs in the world. We supply the highest number of vaccines in the world. Our biotech sector is expected to reach easily about 150 billion US by 2025, and India has the largest number of US FDA approved manufacturing facilities in the world. As our Prime Minister announced, and he mentioned actually recently, Indian industry came to the fore and started producing masks, sanitizers, PPEs almost overnight. Much of this was not being even manufactured in India. These were all imported. But today, we are able to manufacture a sizable portion, and in fact also give to the world PPEs. Say, for instance, our textile companies have come together. We are manufacturing ventilators now in India. So there are many opportunities that have gotten thrown up in the last few weeks and a couple of months, and we are seeing India seize some of these opportunities ably. While we export drugs, say for instance, India also has capabilities in R&D and is currently actively working to develop a vaccine for COVID. In addition, the healthcare sector can provide medical care to global patients in the country and is emerging as a major hub for medical travel. Further, our doctors and nurses can fill skill gaps overseas in very, very large numbers. Going forward, I really see new demand, new investments waiting to happen in these areas of biotech, life sciences, and healthcare sectors. Coming to the energy sector, even with the rapid fall in the crude oil prices, I believe this is a good time to push green energy green energy development. There ought to be new narrative on climate change, green energy, and health for all. India is rapidly moving ahead on green energy, and this is likely to gather even more pace. With travel restriction, there are many startups, as we are seeing, working on telecom, mobile app solutions. With good support, they can grow into much bigger businesses. Banking and insurance businesses are evergreen and will continue to service people everywhere. It is just that these sectors too will have to really find ways to cater customer needs in the new and innovative ways as we go along. And there will be also a rising demand for smart living solutions, namely solutions that will help automate functions that make life at home and office much easier. So there are opportunities in the sector of even outsourced and remote jobs. India is already a lead player in the IT and the IT-enabled services, accounting for more than 50% of the global exports. With digital technology emerging even stronger after the crisis period, this can be effectively deployed to provide more services. There are also avenues opening up in big data, Internet of Things, blockchain, and so on. Many of these areas where India has the potential to emerge as a leader. The list of opportunities that we have in front of us are some of these, and there are many, many more. The question actually would be, how best can we leverage these opportunities and reconfigure our business models? This brings me to what business must do to be able to really leverage these opportunities most effectively. India has the advantage of large and growing and a very large growing market. Businesses must recalibrate therefore their strategies. Asset light options are order of the day. Depending on more on people and knowledge power to drive new growth avenues. Flexibility will be really the key advantage for businesses in the current scenario. Agile organizations will be better able to change directions and adapt to the new models of business. This is a kind of a fast turnaround time and quick thinking that is going to keep businesses resilient and able to find the next big opportunity. Just to conclude, I will really like to talk about some quick actions that our youth can contribute in dealing with the disruptions that currently are underway. First, look at creative solutions for the innovative and for the unusual opportunities. Two, work together for the right partners, because collaborations and partnerships will be the best way to devise and implement pioneering solutions. Third, keep your eyes open to finding new opportunities, examining them and exploring how to leverage them. Four, include the options for upskilling and reskilling in your life goals and on an ongoing basis, depending on changing work scenarios. Five, keep abreast of what is happening in the technology world, because this is where the new disruptions will really emerge from. Six, whatever you do in your official work domain as you go forward in your careers, it must be done with complete loyalty to the organization, because this is what will set you apart. Seven, within all this, never lose sight of social responsibilities and community engagement. Eight, do work towards protecting the environment and promoting the circular economy with minimal wastage. Nine, adopt a balanced work-life model that gives you sufficient time to explore what you actually are doing, because it is possible that the next opportunity will come from all of that. Finally, at number 10, I would leave you with a message to never lose heart and to always remain optimistic even in difficult times. I am sure that we will get out of this current situation, and I will drop in at your campus someday, physically touch base with all of you in the near future. Amity will not only continue to be a leading institution, and it has already led in tough times, but will also lead by example, setting the trend for academia to build upon. My association with Amity is strong, and I look forward to growing that in the future. And my thanks once again to the university for giving me this opportunity and to share some of my thoughts with all of you. And thank you very much for your patient hearing, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you very much. A very important fundamental question for all businesses. All businesses have to have a contingent plan. They do have a contingent plan. But that's why during the course of my speech, I mentioned that what is important, these surprises will come. There will be surprises from where this COVID, say for instance, the health scare was talked about. There was discussion on that could be something of a big health scare that will come to us. But who imagined that it will be of this scale and of this type? But having said that, the point that I mentioned was that there is a need for for all companies, all businesses especially, all institutions to be nimble-footed and to be very fast on their and agile in their thinking. And I think that is very, very critical at this point in time, to anticipate, to plan, to really look at today the way one of the biggest things that happens is in India, especially in India, and I would imagine that it happens all over the world, but in India, that we function brilliantly under pressure, and be it business, be it any other sphere of work. And as I said, that who at that point in time believed that Indian businesses will be able to start getting into a tractor company or an earth-moving construction company getting into manufacturing of ventilators, an automobile company working on ventilators, people who starting to manufacture PPEs, which are world-class PPEs in the country, in the world, who are starting to manufacture them in the country. So I would imagine the agility and the nimble-footedness is going to be one of the most important facets that will take us to deal with these sudden surprises that you mentioned that will come our way. And that's going to be very, very critical in times to come. So I think one of the most important areas that comes out of COVID-19, and well, it was emerging, COVID-19 only aggravates it, and I would see that what the biggest challenge that our country would face is that of jobs. And that's going to be very, very critical. You know, what happens because of people, we know that people have migrated back to their, many people have migrated back to their homes, to rural India. Companies would function with much lesser number of people. Many areas of functioning would see much lesser number of labor, would see much lesser number of people in companies. So there would be a push which will go towards much more automation. We will see new types of, therefore, livelihoods which will also emerge in rural India. In the districts, we will have to invest in that. We will have to see that non-agricultural rural incomes are well developed so that we can really address this huge population of our country who are gainfully sort of employed. And for all of this, there will be new skills which will be required, and even freelance skills. They will be required for every aspect of our society, every sector that I spoke about, be it hospitality sector, be it the services industry, be it the manufacturing industry, be it in the education field. There will be different levels of skilling that India will require. All future skill gaps that we have mapped upon shows that there is so much more that's required in terms of skilling, and that will be required because Indian companies will be requiring people over a period of time. There will be requirement of different types of people. Therefore, that gap can only be filled up through skills. And I would think that you will see much more investment by both government and by the private sector into skill development and for people in this entire ecosystem of skill development. Let me try and answer this question this way. Leaders actually today need to be resilient at this point in time. It is important for them to take into account the needs of all stakeholders, particularly employees and workers, to instill confidence and also future prospects. And leaders must communicate with their stakeholders and be transparent. Further, innovative thinking and really thinking completely in the new domains is what is required. For example, I spoke about it a little bit. Auto companies have configured to produce ventilators, and apparel companies in producing PPEs. New opportunities can be explored with the mindset of innovation. And I would really underline that one of the most important hallmark of leadership will be ethics. And commitment to its people, because we need to show the leaders would have to lead the way. So, and today one of the things that has arisen, especially in the corporate leadership, is this gap which we have talked about in the recent past about the trust deficit which many of our industry has sometimes experienced, be it with the government or be it with the civil society. So standing tall by being through moral, through a strong moral ground as well as on ethics is going to be one of the most important hallmarks for leadership in our country. So I have, my answer is twofold. I mean, yes, in most cases, no in some. So let me explain. Yes, in terms of quality standards, our ability, our intelligence, our technology, our Indian goods and products are sometimes very, very competitive till the time it reaches the factory's door. It becomes less and less competitive as it goes from the factory door to maybe the sport because of our logistics and so on and so forth. So what I would really like to say here, look at we have been global leaders in many things. We have been able to establish ourselves as global leaders in manufacturing, say for instance in car, the component industry, and so on and so forth. One can take many examples, but what we really so I don't see a problem from that point of view for a leading company like Apple to find its strong feet in India. Both from the services point of view as well as from the manufacturing point of view. But I would think that we need to, for attracting capital, we need to, and I alluded to it, is to focus on ease of doing business. We need to make things at the district level, at the ground level, becoming much easier for business to function. And I think that's where we need to do a little bit of homework, and we have to work in partnership between the industry and the government to see that there are certain our rules, regulatory frameworks, reforms, internal reforms are carried on very strongly to make such capital getting more and more attracted and become more and more successful in India. I would say that corporate India must should continue to focus on, should not lose sight on triple bottom line. And I think they must look at both its own profitability. Definitely, it is important. It must look after. It must look from the prism of from the prism of its the entire ecosystem where it is. So sustainability is going to be the profits need to be sustainable, whatever we are doing, so that what comes out of sustainable production, sustainable product, sustainable service, that needs to be very, very carefully seen. And of course, corporate India would have to work with a lot of human face. A human face, when I say it is for its employees, it would also need to be whether they are the way they manage, and I think most of the corporates would do that, is being very ethical and very, very right in its practices as it moves along, because this is the time when a lot of flab will get cut out of your company. You will be obviously cutting, and most of us are doing it. Every one of us are seeing to it how we can cut costs, cut corners. And when I say cut costs, it is the extra that we are spending, and which is probably unnecessary. And how do we become smarter? That is going to be the focus of the business models will change. So I would imagine that the focus would be completely different from what it has been. The new normal is going to be completely different from where we were. And so what we will need to be in search of at this point in time is to see how we can become more and more competitive, given that the challenges both in demand as we move along, and also supply side challenges that we have would remain for quite some time to come. So, between the government and the industry, we have been looking at some of the sectors which can be seen to become quote unquote, if I can say, champion sectors in the country. And there are many sectors that we believe can be the sectors for tomorrow for India. I will name some of the sectors. Food processing is one such sector. It's a very labor-intensive sector, and India can actually go into strong heights. Similarly, there are other sectors like textiles, auto components. Chemicals is one such sector, and I would imagine that it is India has a huge strength in terms of both quality chemicals and chemicals both for internal consumption, but more so for also exports, is one sector which will be a growing sector, and there are many issues which relates to how we can see to it that we are able to create much more conducive environment of ease of doing business in the chemicals area, notwithstanding the issues of environment, etc., that we need to keep in mind. But that's one sector which has an enormous scope in India to expand, and we would look forward to actually that being nurtured in India to become one of those champion sectors that I talked about. I would imagine that this is a temporary challenge. In fact, many countries look forward to coming to India for medical value travel, and I think this is one industry which is very, very badly hit at this point in time. But I would imagine that as things move on, it will take a few quarters for this to heal up. We are dealing with a challenge at this point in time. But let me say that I would imagine that this is a promising sector for India. We have some of our best products and services at the most competitive prices across the world. That healthcare is being delivered in India. So we would emerge out of this, but it will take the next few quarters for us to do so. But we will, at some point in time, bounce back. Here also, I would mention that we need to, with the scope that we have and the way where we are operating, I see a tremendous gap there. We have a huge potential in this. And I think post-COVID, it would be we have to be very careful. Things are slowly opening up. There would be some people trickling in, as you will see in the next couple of quarters when the airline sector starts operating across the world. But I would imagine that India's potential on medical tourism is not realized near full potential at all. And I would say, imagine by next year, we should see that once again come back. At this point in time, yes, it is a very stressed sector, I must agree. You know what, the way I would look at, as you know, that there are, there is a lot of action which is being taking place in terms of both the cure as well as the vaccine. There is a lot of work which is going into it. And I am quite hopeful that we will sooner or later get some sort of a cure which will enable us deal with it in much more effectively than what we are dealing at this point in time. Second, I would imagine that we across the world, we are learning to live with this. We are learning to live with it. Anyone can have it as long as we can get cured. As long as a cure would be available much before probably the vaccine comes in, we should learn how to live with this. And to live with this, we should have to focus on how do we destigmatize some of this entire issues which relates to COVID. We need to understand that, we need to accept that and move on. And but as we go along, there will be, as you rightly said, that there will be I see the next 2 quarters to be very challenging. Demand would not be picking up. I'm sure all of us are buying less. All of us are not going to malls. All of us are there. No malls are open. No retail stores are open. So there is a demand which is not there at this point in time. So what we really need to do is to see how we can enthuse demand at this point in time. So we are saying that we do more and more business as normal to see, and I mentioned about e-commerce being one of it, to see how consumption can be sort of seen to come forth in the next few months. But yes, there is a challenge, and if such challenges happen, I am sure that we will see newer interventions from the government besides whatever we have seen which has been done, to see how the economy is kept in terms of kept alive with those interventions, which would be extremely important. So WTO, as you have rightly said, is under pressure. WTO is, but I think we will see how more and more companies. I mean, we are seeing more and more countries talking about how we talk about this word which has come back, protectionist attitude by many of the countries, flouting the WTO regulations or WTO framework. Now, having said that, I would imagine that you will also see a new normal growing there, and there will be some countries which will come forth in terms of contributing to what could be that new normal be. India has a huge potential. There is always, as you are rightly seeing, that some countries are goods from some countries, investments into some countries are getting challenged at this point in time. So India should pick up on that opportunity. We are seeing that that there is a huge amount of possibility of India to cater to the world, and it's not just the pharmaceutical sector which India has today supported many countries, but India is capable of its products, to be supplied to the rest of the world, and that might lead to that new normal that I was talking about. And yes, there are the large number of guidelines and rules which the WTO prescribes. Some countries even get away. We don't even know the type of violations that take place in some of these countries in terms of WTO rules. But yes, I would think that the multilateralism should be supported, and we should see WTO living up to be once again being relevant. And it would be very, very important for WTO to be relevant, and I think some of the countries like ourselves must work towards it, towards creating giving much more teeth and power to is required to a body like the WTO, so that it can really look at trade, the world trade, in the right perspective. And in all of that, I see the opportunity for India to be very strong if we get our act right. And of course, I mentioned some of the points that we need to do well. This is a very, very important question. All along, we have always focused and we have always thought, and for us till this time, that again, the normal way of functioning was to make the city smart, the city more infrastructure-wise smart, otherwise smart. We needed to cater to the migration which used to take place from the rural to urban, and we always catered to much more of investments into the urban infrastructure and cities. I have always championed the idea, and I think what we need to also look at India is to see how we can make our villages smart, how we can look at, and I mentioned during the course of this discussion, during the question answer session, I talked a little bit about how we can look at more opportunities in rural India through social as well as physical infrastructure being invested upon. And I also mentioned that we need to see as to how we can focus on non-agricultural rural livelihood. And I think non-agricultural rural livelihood creation of that would be also very important. The other aspect is we have seen this, we have noticed that the pattern of migration very, very clearly in the last few weeks as to how it has happened in India. My suggestion and what one is going to work for is also to see that in India, the right type of investments are also directed towards certain parts of the country where which would also lessen the type of migratory hazards that we have seen. So we need to create jobs for people where they are. And I think that's going to be a very essential part of our planning that we should focus upon. So here again, I would imagine there is a partnership approach that will be required from the local state government, the central government, the industry, to see how certain typical type of investments are carried through proper planning and development of infrastructure into those areas from where we have seen migratory labor in such large numbers. And besides, of course, this very important point of creating strong rural infrastructure, both healthcare, education, I would imagine, and many others. There should the district level hospitals to improvement, district level jobs which need to be created through investments into, and I would imagine these all have to be non-agricultural income to a great extent, which will sustain people to stay back happily in some of the areas for which they leave and come to urban cities. It's an important question because one of the most affected sectors today is, of course, the small and the micro and the mid-sized companies. The credit availability, say, for instance, for the MSME and the reduction in the interest rates should help the MSME at this point in time. And monetary support, as in some countries, is a fiscal challenge, and CII has recommended opening credit taps for them. The redefinition of this sector, as you know, it has been redefined, the MSME sector, will ensure that more enterprises are able to get the packages that are available for the MSME. And we believe that this will be introduced very quickly and at the earliest. And it is important that the MSMEs are facilitated through competitiveness measures, which would be better industrial parks, better logistics, more information on tapping export markets. They have a strong export potential. They should be able to do that. Besides the MSMEs, payments are also pretty much delayed, both from the government departments as well as from PSUs and even from some private sectors. And I think that's something that at this point in time, when we talked about the role of business and what should we be doing, that's something that we should be careful about, in terms of seeing to it that they are paid. The unorganized sector, which is a very important point that you said, there should be, I would imagine that we should see to it that the entire unorganized sector is, which employs so much actually, which is, we are able to focus very seriously on both migrant laborers as well as the unorganized sectors, because most of them are employed in the unorganized sector, as a special sort of a department which needs to really focus both at the state level and at the senior level. But at the MSME, I would like to see that many of the measures that have been taken over the last few years, the MSME's liquidity issues have been somewhat addressed by the recent stimulus packages, and that should be of help. The 3.7 lakh crores through liquidity support, which was including loans with the government guarantees, that's one very important point. And second, the 9,250 EPF support, where government paid the EPF contribution of both employers and employees. That's a very important point. And the 75,000 crore rupees of liquidity support to NBFCs, which predominantly lent to the MSMEs. So these are some of the things which I would think would help the MSMEs, which are the backbone. And if the MSMEs are not strong, it would be difficult for the supply chain to be completed, with the large companies also will not be supported. So we need to have a very strong focus on the MSMEs. As I mentioned, there are two aspects of this. Global supply chains have been severely disrupted, as you said, when you were talking about the global supply chain. And this will obviously have a strong effect on the imports and Indian imports and exports. And they will obviously be there. And what all really needs to be done to make global trade and business sustainable in the future is a big question that is coming up. So India's exports and imports have been really affected by the lockdown in most countries. We have had interaction on exports with our Commerce Ministry, and we one of the things that he stated, that while export contracted by over 60% in April, there is an expectation that the contraction can come down to about 30 to 35% in May, with the June numbers probably which will be at par with what we were last year. So the minister also really felt that the exports can be greatly boosted by reviving manufacturing. So we also need to look at diversification of our export basket from India. Our share in the top global exported items is less than 1%. And it is important to build up products such as electronics, machinery, and automotives, and so on and so forth. And on the import side, the fall in oil prices has been an additional factor in contraction by about 58%. And if we are to become an export powerhouse and avail of the global opportunities in shifting supply chain, then our imports should be carefully calibrated so that imports and raw materials have low tariffs, while higher tariffs are based on final goods. It is here that we have an opportunity to become really the supply chain of the world as alternate to China, which has also been driven by changes in their policies and higher labor costs in China. So ramping up local manufacturing capacities, further improving ease of doing business, and more reforms in addition to what has been announced, especially on the land, reforms on the labor, reforms on cost of finance, cost of power, top-class infrastructure, and business-friendly regulations and many such easing of such processes will really help India get some of those investments that you talked about and gain a major footprint in the global supply chain. That's the way I would look at it. The top companies in India have globally comparable technology standards, if one can say, and are able to match global benchmarks in, say, artificial intelligence, machine learning, Internet of Things, etc. This is also beginning to happen in the second-tier companies. So among the MSMEs, the capability for technology is very high, as we see in the numerous startups that have emerged in the last 5 years. These are based on technology and new ideas and new platforms. However, the larger base of MSME requires assistance for technology adoption. The government therefore should set up 2 new tool rooms and ensure that common facilities are made available in industrial hubs. Industry 4.0 is sweeping the world, and all of us know that, and we in India can be much a part of this revolution. And I think the mindset change is there. But the challenge is to lower costs and to make these technologies readily available. This in itself is an opportunity. However, these are issues that there are many issues that needs to be addressed first. We need to encourage R&D and innovation, and the government should set up an R&D fund which will absorb at least 50% of the risks. Second, one would like to see that we still need to strengthen the IPR regime in terms of implementation. Finally, India has a large pool of scientific and engineering talent which needs to be skilled and to be readily absorbed. So you talked about skills earlier, so again another potential of what we can do with skills.